outside.
Yes, you are. See, guys, that's the editor. Say hi.
Hi.
Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This will be the final podcast of the 2023 season. We are going on hiatus for obviously Christmas reasons, but I figured I'd end this year with a very good story that I think warms the heart of everybody that is in the military field, knows of it. Any historian buffs out there know this story. And today we are talking about the Christmas Truce of 1914. Let's briefly discuss what the events were that led up to the Christmas Truce. So there were two major battles that had happened right before this: the Battle of the Europes, the first Battle of the Europes, and the Race to the Sea. Both very, very costly, very exhausting battles, both strategically, logistically. All were draining on all forces involved: the French, the British, the Germans, the Austrians. It was a very dramatic start to World War I. They were not ready for this war to do what it ended up becoming. They were not ready for the trench warfare to take place. By Christmas, it's already noted that war was dragging on longer than everybody was, because the notion was that everyone was going to be it was a war that was going to be over before Christmas. They touted around the world that British troops will be home by Christmas. It was now prevalent after these two battles, and going into the ending of November, that it was going to be a long war. What exactly was the truce? Because this truce it was an unofficial truce that went all along all the battlefront in World War I. The Western, be more specific, the Western battlefront. It was very variable. The truce only lasted for 2 days, and I'll get to that story in a minute. But in others, it lasted from the day before Christmas Eve to New Year's. Well, and essentially what led to it was a lull. The troops didn't have enough really ammunition to keep firing at each other, and they really didn't have enough supplies to keep going either. But yet, as normal in trench warfare, the officers did not listen, they did not care, so they had these men man their positions anyway. No one knows where it officially started. I read many different sources on I got notes, I got all this stuff here, and no one officially knows who waved the first flag where. It was just kind of one of those unanimous. The Germans, in some areas, the Germans came out with white flag. In some areas, the British came out with white flags, and it was just kind of like this. The term is the live and let live policy. It's an idea in war where men, they know that they're not fighting each other personally. They know that they are fighting on behalf of their countries. They're fighting on behalf of their nations and their nation's interests, not necessarily for harming themselves, especially in this war. To compare this to World War II, you would have never seen SS soldiers, at least to my knowledge, willing to party with American soldiers during World War II, because it wasn't just a borderline difference. There was a moral difference. There was a fractual issue within the morality. This war, every one of these countries had pretty much the same goal: the expansion of their empires. They were fighting for the national glory. The treaty alliance system of Bismarck betrayed itself, and it started a whole backlog of warfare that now every country by treaty had to oblige to. And so soldiers would march to these battlefronts and die because of nationalism. And many of them, hundreds of thousands, would die for, in some cases, literally a football field's worth of land, or no land at all, and they would end up getting pushed back by the next morning. World War I was atrocious, especially as the war would drag on. And I think what makes the Christmas Truce of 1914 more of a context in our heart of like the sympathies of man. And so, with all that said, the live and let live policy was this idea that we're fighting other men who are just here to fight for their nations. There's no personal qualm. And I think the Christmas Truce of 1914 perfectly exemplifies that, because they all pretty much got the same idea around the same time. And some can say it was because it was fueled by this lack of ammo, this lack of munitions, lack of supplies that made them go and talk to their fellow men just to get these supplies. And then there's others that want to say they were endowed by the Christmas spirit. I would like to allude to this one. It's just that time of year. Men are far from home in some cases. They're an entire sea away from home. And to have some form of jovial companionship is better than none. I would like to note that this is not the only truce that would happen during this time. There were several other truces that would take place during the war. Similar to this, they would stop and do their collect the dead and whatever. And it was not, and most of the times these were not official truces. Even this historic truce was not an official officers meet officers and say, we're calling for peace. No, this was done by soldiers, for soldiers, and as we'll later find out in a moment, that would be heartbreaking for a few. Now, who was involved in this? Well, roughly 100,000 British and German troops were the start of it. They met along the sides, and in some areas of the Western Front, the British would just start singing Christmas carols and slowly walk out on the battlefield to symbolize peace. In some areas, the Germans would walk out with a white flag with candles placed in their hands and to say, hey, it's Christmas time, okay? We need some peace. And as the two sides would fight, or as the two sides would meet, they would exchange gifts, souvenirs, hats, buttons, novelties. They would share different forms of tobacco, alcohols, and they would continue to do this. And unfortunately, in some cases, the artillery would still be falling until finally, I guess, some spotters finally picked up on it, and the artillery would finally stop. And what we would know as the Christmas Truce would officially start, according to documentation and according to first-hand reports, would start on Christmas Eve, December 24th. The most common date of ending is the 26th, the day after Christmas. Now, in some areas, that would be expanded out to New Year's, but along most of the Western Front, it was that 2 days of peace. Now, what did they do in these 2 days of peace? Well, there's all kinds of things that they would have done. They actually had burial parties for their fallen dead because it gave them a time to not only meet the enemy and party with their enemy, but they were able to gather their fallen friends off the battlefield. And as they did so, they would, in some cases, even the enemy would join in their respects to their fallen soldiers from the battlefield. Joint services were held, and to me, that's enlightening. Just it's a beautiful sentiment to a war that ends up becoming a very, very bad atrocity. War is bad. It's a necessary evil, unfortunately. It's something that's going to happen in life. Sometimes us common people don't have much say in it, but we do not have much control over the situation. These men took an opportunity. Instead of just hating their foe, they met in some cases in the middle of no man's land, fought their differences, and even played a game of football. Europeans call it football. Us Americans call it soccer. They would play soccer in the middle of no man's land. They decorate. One of the instances that stuck out to me was the Germans came out and set up a Christmas tree out in the middle of no man's land and met with the British around the Christmas tree, and that's where some of the famous images that you see of British and German soldiers meeting together and discussing their differences and singing. Actually, they would sing carols and stuff. That really stuck out to me when I was reading through some of this stuff. I'm getting a little emotional, but we as a society today, I don't think we know how to do that. Around this Christmas season, I hope the world can look upon, especially in what's going on right now, whether it be Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, China, we could take a lesson from this Christmas truce, and where troops of completely different nationalities with completely different mindsets met on a battlefield and became friends. The unfortunate side is, come the 26th of December, going back to the actual story, to many reports, it was the British that broke the truce first. As a lot of their men woke up on the 26th, they finally started telling their men, hey, stop going out there, we got a war to win, you had your fun. It's the 26th, Christmas is over. Almost to the point of treason. They would charge people with treason if they tried to go back out there. Again, it's a harsh reality, but they were in the middle of a war. The boatsman has to have his quota. Which again, sad, but it's a very sad but true reality. And the legacy of this is, I think this was the last real Christmas truce we saw before the era of modern warfare. Big Christmas truces like that were very popular. And they were unofficial. They were just where soldiers said, hey, we're going to meet in the middle because it's Christmas season and we don't want to fight. We're starving, we're hungry. I'd rather know my enemy. I'd like to think that's the mindset. Again, going back to the arms here. Christmas spirit kind of took over them and said, hey, some of these guys might not live to see next December. Why not celebrate it? And that's the story of the Christmas truce. It wouldn't be too long afterwards. The battle would commence, and it gave both sides enough time to kind of refuel, rearm. The war would continue, and that's the story. The Christmas truce was and will forever be the most famous truce among all the world wars. I think what makes it unique, I know I'm kind of rambling at this point, but what makes it unique to the world is the fact that it was not done officially. It was not done by officers signing documents or, yes, we will meet here and do this. It was not nothing like that. It was literally done by soldiers being soldiers, for soldiers, of soldiers, and by the soldiers wanting to know their better man. Unlike us Americans that'll cross a river to kill you in your sleep, that spent Christmas getting to know themselves. Getting back to the truce, let's talk about a little bit about the political side of it, the political ramifications of it. The politics of the truce actually ended up being very sad because neither the British, the French, nor the Germans wanted it to be advertised. They actually censored it in all three nations as to how much of it could be shared and shown, and they would tell journalists not to share it because they were afraid of the effect it would have on their recruitment levels or conscript happiness or their conscript numbers, and how much people were actually willing to stay in the war after seeing how friendly they could be to their enemy. It was actually us Americans who were neutral at the time to share the first images in Times Magazine at the first of the new year showing this. To me, I think that's, again, another testament to America. The reality is these people are fighting a war. I think we knew at the time that it was a very stupid war. A lot of men died for no reason. Here's something to smile about. Here's something that can give these people joy. Now, of course, in 1914, no one knew the horror that World War I would be. No one knew that it would be the literal definition of why we have the word shell shock now. It was a thing before, but I think World War I is perfectly exemplified the definition of shell shock. With all this said, I hope that you and your family are home for Christmas. I hope you guys have a happy new year. And I hope that your families, if you have soldiers abroad, write them. I know they would appreciate it. If you have family members that are returning home, check on them. This is that time of year for a lot of veterans to go on hard times. Please reach out. Make sure check on your battle buddies. Check on your family, friends. On a YouTube channel note, I am happy to start this year. I'm very much appreciative of the support we've started with, and I hope to see it going into the new year. Thanks, and I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas. Here's a cat.